the World FM Day event, World FM Day theme of which this year is making a real difference. And for this event hosted by the International Special Interest Group, we're really focusing on social value. I've got a number of really exciting speakers with us this evening, who I'll introduce in a few seconds. And also welcome to those who are joining us online. We've got a number of people who are joining us for the webinar as well. Apologies to those online that the technology unfortunately isn't working for you to be able to see us in the room here, but hopefully everybody should be able to see the slides and hear the audio. Technology's not working.
Point at the computer.
Brilliant. Wow. Yep. So quick brief about the International Special Interest Group. The Special Interest Group has been going now for a number of years. It is one of the leading strategic groups within the IWFM. If anybody would like to explore joining the ISIG, if you're not already a member, or any suggestions for themes for future events, then please do get in touch. My email address is up there, so please drop me a line. And also, we're always keen to recruit new volunteers, whether that's as members of the ISIG or to join our committee. So if you are interested in joining the committee and playing a role within the ISIG, then please do get in touch. As I said, the theme for World FM Day worldwide is making a real difference. And we are really focusing on social value today. We would like to thank our hosts. So first of all, thank you to Katie, the new CEO of Skanska UK. A big thank you to Matt and particularly to Emma Strong, who's been working all day to get the internet back online and to make all of this possible. So a huge thank you to the Skanska team. Big thank you to Sean Gibbons, who's our Vice Chair of the International SIG. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today, but he's really been a driving force behind World FM Day. And a huge thank you also to Lucy Stone, who's done all of the organising for this event and making all of this happen. If any of you are using social media this evening, then there's a number of hashtags and Twitter handles there to cite to make our content more accessible and to make it to increase the number of shares online. Quick bit of housekeeping before we start. Health and safety, there's no fire drills planned, as you probably expect at this time of night. So if the alarm does go off, then we need to leave the building. Nearest evacuation point, if you go out of the doors of the room here, the nearest evacuation point is straight ahead. It's clearly signposted, or alternatively, you can go up the stairs to where you came in and go out to the main entrance. The muster point, if it does happen, is out the back of the building. So if you're going out to the front of the building, you turn left and it's ahead of you. Toilets are out of the doors here and along the wall to the left. I think the ladies is first, then the gents follows. And if you have got mobile phones, obviously, if you are tweeting or posting on LinkedIn, then you'll need to use them, but please put them on silent if you could. So a brief outline of our agenda this evening. First of all, Matt Mannion will do an introduction on behalf of our host, Skanska. Then be an introduction to social value from Peter and Ilaria from Faithful and Gould. Guy Battle will be giving us an overview of the TOMS framework. Sharon Maynard will then be outlining Skanska's social value strategy. And finally, James from Mace will be describing social value at Mace. We'll then have a Q&A session at the end, be predominantly focused on the room here. If we are able to do any Q&A for the online viewers, then we will do, but unfortunately I don't know if the technology is up to it at the moment. But we'll just have a short Q&A at the end, and then if anybody's got any further questions, then please do catch up with one of our speakers at the networking session after the after the presentation, or by all means drop us a note via the ISIG contact details and we'll be pleased to get back to you. So first of all, Matt Mannion with an outline of SCANSCA.
Thanks, Andy. Hopefully the technology works. Yes, it is fantastic. So I'm Matt Mannion. I'm head of business development for SCANSCA. My job here this morning is just to sort of give you a very brief introduction to SCANSCA and their FM sides, but a bit more than that this evening around where we are today. And welcome to our offices at 51 Moorgate. This is actually a WELL Platinum version 2 office. It's also a Smart Score Platinum. These are all wonderful things until our internet goes down, and then they all kind of. So I was, really hoping to give you the merit of the WELL Platinum office today, and we have a few technical difficulties. But that's FM. Things don't always go to plan, and that's what people are for. That's you guys in the room and our FM teams. What make them so brilliant is we have problems, we look at solutions, and people like Emma and my team today have done a fantastic job of getting us back online. So again, a big thank you to you. But this is a WELL Platinum version 2 office. We achieved this last year, and we were the first office to get that new accreditation. We've got some fantastic people here. Fran, hands up, Fran. We've got Laura. Is Laura here? There's Laura. If you would be interested to have a look around the office for a bit of a lessons learned, the journey we've been on, learn about some of the smart technology that we have in the building. We've got our own product called Intellect. Laura and Fran will be happy to do some tours following this evening's event, so you're more than welcome to do that. So SCANSCA, who are we? Well, we are, as you probably know, as a pretty big construction company and a big infrastructure provider globally. Our FM company has been in operation for well over 20 years now, not surprisingly of what we've built, and we've grown very organically to a business today that covers over 50 million square foot of space right across the UK. We directly deliver hard FM services. We specialise in training and developing engineers, technicians, project managers. From our expertise, it's core to what SCANSCA does. And we do some great stuff. We've got some great figures on the board there. What does that mean? What does that mean? It's all great. It shows that we've got credibility, we've got strong resilience, we've got experience, we can deliver. But what does it really mean? Well, it means this. It means happy people, because it's about buildings, but it's the buildings are who shape the people who are in it. It's about the experience of the people in those buildings, whether it's people here at one of our schools in Bristol, whether it's employees working in a workspace in London, whether it's a nurse working at Barts Hospital that we maintain, whether it's a member of the Army at Northwood or MOD main building. We're all about the people in these buildings and making their experience fantastic and smile like that. But we can't do that unless we have great people in our business that understand what it is to deliver a great service. And that comes back to having people with really strong values. And we as a business have to articulate those values really, really clearly. I've drafted mine back to March 2020, a horrible time for many. Just about to go into lockdown. A lot of businesses never had this before, didn't know what to do. Our CEO at the time said, we're not sure how we're going to navigate this, but we're going to start with our values and we'll go from there. So all our decisions will go from our values, and that will be the guiding principle to doing the right thing for our employees, for our customers, and for the communities that we operate in. But what it also means is we're driven to do the best thing, not just by our customers, but by the communities that we operate in. And it's not just a flag sign to say we're doing great things, aren't we brilliant? It's actually meaningful things, it's tangible things. What can we actually do to impact the communities in which we work? What legacy can we leave behind us? And Sharon will talk to you today in a bit more detail about some real tangible examples of what we've done, but also lessons we've learned as well, which I think is really valuable for everyone in the room. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for visiting our offices, and look forward to a really interesting session. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Is there? It's too close to that perspective. We're going to talk around introduction to social value. There's two things before we start. We'll talk about who we are in a minute time from that perspective. There's two things, two good pieces of news. One is we've only got 7 slides between us. That's excellent from that perspective. I know Guy's got about 40, so just and this is really high level when we talk around social value from this perspective. This is the dummies guide to social value. It's got to be dummies guide because Lara and I are presenting on it, so that's the reason why. So we'll fly into it. We'll do introductions in a minute, but if we go to the next slide, we all want to get your lovely phones out. And we're doing something wrong, and you did it right. We're going to do something wrong. Oh, okay. No, we'll do it the old school way. There we go. Right. So everybody get the phones out. You can either scan the QR code or it's www.menti.com. And we've got a question to ask you in a minute's time. I'm not expected, but just want you to get yourself prepared. It might come up straight with a question, which is fine. Please feel free to answer if it does, but I want to make sure you're all ready before we move on.
Oh, no,
So this will kill 2 minutes, about 15 minutes of live sessions. So anyways, it's great. Loving it.
need to connect to the Wi-Fi, I think.
Oh, we need anybody from FM as well? Wi-Fi as well?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
really,
we feel
it's really difficult. Are
Oh.
you ready? It's Skanska Guest, or
Oh.
somebody might help me with that one. Was it Skanska Guest?
Yeah.
As guest.
And now, listen very carefully.
Hold on, hold on.
Capital N.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. We should have thought about this before, shouldn't we?
Everybody's prepared in that now.
I mean, I'm in without Wi-Fi.
It says it has, the network has security.
Keep going. Password capital N, O orange, W William, Y Yankee, capital R Roger, lowercase y, rest is lowercase, which is N for Nancy, E for Edward, K for Kelly, and figure 4.
No.
I've got.
Username is
Exactly correct. Yeah, absolutely right. Use the old way. Right. While you're all doing that, it comes up to the QR code again in a minute. So it's not, don't worry too much. But we just want to do some introductions while you're doing all that from that perspective. This is the boring bit. So my name's Peter Mason Brook. Work for Faith and Gold. Faith and Gold are a multinational professional services business, particularly in the built environment. My background is procurement and supply chain, heavily involved in social value for the last 10 years. We've been very notable at winning very large public sector frameworks like SCAPE, Crown Commercial Services and Pagabo, where there is a real need to demonstrate social value, particularly as a lot one single provider from that perspective. So I've been heavily involved in helping to support our business in demonstrating the social value consideration frameworks. But since then, we've really, over the last couple of years, have really embedded social value into our business, recruiting to really look at the benefit of helping support our clients in their purpose around driving social value. Valeria.
Yeah, and I come into Faithful and Gold a year ago. My background is very much local public sector, and as social value grows, I was working in the implementation of the processes, how you implement social value in the procurement, into contract management. And then I got really interested and very passionate about the delivery of social value. And I moved into Faithful and Gold because we got a broad number of clients that we can help in delivering, but also like in driving social value at the end. And yeah, the agenda is quite short, as Peter just said, and we're gonna just introduce what do we mean by social value. We wanted to see a test in real life, like you guys all here for understanding a little bit about more social value, but social value is a term that we have it going around for the last decade. So I hope that you guys got an idea, but it's not really a definition for all. So in a minute, we're gonna see the result of the survey that we wanted to do. And then Peter's gonna go through the definitions, the many definitions.
Yeah.
And we're gonna just run through the requirements and then some outcomes and delivery and how social value can be implemented in facility management. Okay, Fadi?
Right. Is it going to work? $1 million?
Oh,
Are we on the internet here? Do we not, we're actually connected? No, we don't think so.
Yes, we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. I don't know. No, that's. I think this point, we did really well up to that point. Well, we'll carry on. Let's see if we can get to the end, and we can always come back out and see if it's worked from that perspective. What we wanted to show was you know, what people thought, what social value really meant from you individuals within the business around here at the moment in time. So really getting a feel as to, you know, what that terminology is. Now, what we've done here is look at some forms of definitions around really helping to understand what we think from a social value perspective is. I'm not going to talk around the public services one, because I've got a slide on that in a moment in time from that perspective, but there's some really good definitions in there around social value, and they're really from websites that I've been able to pull from that perspective. But you can see there that I like the IWFM one. I think that's really directly related to the FM services from that perspective, and not because guys here, but the social value report one is a brilliant one as well from that perspective, because it's very defined that it's not about just about making money. And that's an interesting comment from my perspective, because social value isn't a tick box exercise. Yeah, social value isn't just writing commitments in bids. Social value isn't about winning work. Social value is a movement. It's an important, and it's really important around helping, assisting, making a positive impact on individuals' lives. That's what social value is, and that's the point that we're trying to get across today in these slides. Is that's the purpose of why we're driving this social value, to make both a positive and a negative impact on the individual from that perspective. So hopefully we'll show you that in the slides from that perspective in a moment's time from that point of view. I think you'll find that through these definitions, you can see that there isn't one definition that speaks everything. You can see there are different ways of saying that from that perspective. And what we wanted to show on this slide is, as businesses here, as operational units or organisations here, you've got to deliver or decide on what the right social value messages are within your organisation. You've all got different ways of working, operational, you've got a number of individuals, you have size of your organisation, capability, region where you deliver or where you operate from that perspective. So having your own definition, have your own mission statement is really important from that perspective. And that's what I wanted to show within that slide is not one statement fits all from that point of view as well. And you've got to be very clear as to what your purpose is around driving and delivering social value from that perspective. We know talk about social value, which is obviously the economic, social and environmental impact from that perspective, but that can mean so much more from that, and Hilaria will go through in a minute's time from that point of view. So that was my slide. I've got one more slide, which is, oh, it works, there you go. Yeah, brilliant, works from that perspective. So I just wanted to talk around the legal legalities around social value from that perspective, but I don't want to go into too much detail. Again, this is quite high level, but it's quite important in some of the change that's happened, particularly over the last 10 years in social value. So Professor Chris White instigated his private members bill in 2012. When he always speaks around the bill, he says it was a 9-page document which included a front page, a back page, and a contents. And that was the content around social value at that point in time from that perspective. But it did get passed through for legislation. And obviously what it said in there is considering adding social, economic and environmental objectives within public sector procurement from that perspective. It wasn't mandated, it was a recommendation. It took another 8 years to refer up to the PPN 0620 notice, which obviously mandated for central government with a 10% weighting to include social value into the procurement activity from that perspective, against 5 core themes, which is COVID-19 recovery, tackling economic inequality, fighting climate change, equal opportunity and health and well-being. And anybody here who is bidding for central government work and potentially local government work as well, you tend to see that that's now happening in tenders where you do get questions asked from usually one of them 5 core themes, usually the 4 core themes. We probably don't see much from the COVID-19 as much as we would have done from that perspective a couple of years in perspective. Most organisations now are bidding for the public sector work should see this, and I think you can see that from that perspective. But what we really need to think about is not just about adding it into bits, which is what I've already said, but it's the actual delivery. And what we're now seeing is public sector bodies are actually asking for not just including it in the tender, which we could have done 2 to 3 years ago. We could have added it in and not been held accountable. We'd actually been held accountable for that. But it's really important. This is around the contract management, particularly around their facilities management, is the actual delivery of social value is very important. More important than actually including it in procurement activity from that perspective. Final bit for me is PPNO 521, which came in force in 2021. Again, what it said in there is that all contracting authorities should include social value into the procurement activity, not just the central government from that perspective. It doesn't seem to be as enforced as much as PPNO 620, if I hasten to add, but I'm open for that for conversation if everybody thinks differently from that point of view. And again, it talked about tackling climate change, creating new businesses, new jobs and new skills, improving supplier diversity, and obviously talking around local considerations as well. And I think that's really important, is local considerations, because we see that more and more is it's not just around adding commitments into bids, but what is the local needs, what is the local requirements, and Ilaria will talk about that in a minute's time, how important that is within social value. Just final bit from me is there is other legislation in other parts of the UK, SPPNO 1020 in Scottish Government and PPNO 121 in Northern Ireland. So that means in every UK country there is now social value within legislation from that perspective as well. Cool, Ilaria.
Yeah, this slide is just to show like a high level what social value outcomes are, what they mean. And you know, if you take the social, you got volunteering, you got charitable donation, or you got diversity and inclusion. This is like just the three is very high level, but you can see how it depends how down you want to drill to actually make a difference within the area where you operate. So as an FM, there are a lot of opportunities where you can actually make a difference as long as you understand the local needs of where you want to deliver the benefit. And in terms of where we are today, in terms of reporting and measuring social value is another big important aspect. You might have heard about corporate social responsibility. It's a term that's been around for longer maybe than social value. Then you got the social return on investment, that there is a kind of a complex way of calculating the benefit. And then there are the TOMs, for example, as well. But the point is that when we operating in an area where we want the works, like we have to report to clients. So we going by the definitions that the clients want us to go in terms of reporting. And so we, at the moment, the measuring is very important, but it's just to just show you that there is many ways at the moment. It's not a final definitive way of reporting social value. And this is just a way I'm working at the moment that can be helpful for a lot of you that wants to deliver social value. So for example, I've been working on delivering social value for care leavers. What does it mean? I had to go and ask to care leavers what is that they wanted, because sometimes we tend to assume what people need. And it was very interesting that at stage one, we spend the longest time. So it's quite frustrating. But then as we understand the needs, we're then moving towards the cycle, I call it 4-stage cycle that I'm working on. And what they wanted was just training and skills, actually focusing very much on soft skills, which I think everybody can deliver this. And for them was quite a big deal. So once you identify, then you know what you want they want you to deliver. So we're now working on providing some work experience, just as about like 1 week to 7 care leavers from a local authority. And then the way we're measuring at the moment, these local authorities using the TOMs. So we're reporting through the TOMs. And then the part that is about capturing feedback. What is that they gained through your activity? That is the most important part that can give you like an insight about how you can improve with the next client or the next activity. And
that's it. I think the only bit I was going to mention on there as well is we have mentioned down the left-hand side of our finish here is that FM is all around people from that perspective. So when we talk around the construction industry, there are social value commitments that they make, which is really related to that. When it comes to FM, it's very much around skills and training, development, really driving and delivering the opportunity through social value in that area as well from that perspective. I think that's the bit that we really wanted to get across in that final slide. All right.
yeah, thank
you.
Big thank you to Peter and Ilaria for that interesting presentation. Now I'd like to hand you over to Guy Battle of the Social Value Portal. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here. So I'm Guy Battle, I'm Chief Exec Social Value Portal. Thank you very much. That was a good sort of overview. I had prepared a few more slides. I could probably use about 20, 40. It was 40 until I realized I only had 12 minutes. So I cut it all that out earlier. So I'm going to keep it, dive into a little bit of detail, but not too much. But I'm going to try and land it in FM because we're here to talk about the workplace and facilities management. So rather than keeping it too high level, I'm going to start off by saying that the world of FM at the moment needs to transform itself. It is missing a massive opportunity, and it is ultimately not really taking responsibility, I don't think, for the communities where the buildings are and the properties you manage are within. So as my starting point, I'm going to talk you through why I think it's so important that you get involved. So this is GPA, so that you know the great GPF, the Government Property Agency, spending £65 billion, the UK in FM management. They spend £13 billion. When you use the TOMS framework, and the TOMS framework is all about putting a value on social, so put a pound value, I'll show you how to do that. We reckon the minimum you should be delivering is 20% social value. So when you look at the industry, the FM industry as a whole, £65 million, you're looking at something like £17 billion worth of social value. Big numbers, big opportunities that you guys are not really tackling at the moment and not embedding into how you go about business. So that is like my challenge at the beginning. As a business, we're not a consultancy. We provide a software platform that helps organizations measure. We're a procurement platform, contract management and reporting. So we support you on a full life cycle of setting targets, monitoring how you deliver against those targets, and finally reporting. Everything's contained on a portal to allow you to achieve that. Importantly, we work across sector. So we work both with the public sector and the private sector. So we understand what the buyers want, and that's where the procurement comes in. We understand how suppliers can we deliver for that. Bit about the business, and I put this up really just to show you how things have changed so much in sort of really 9 years. I started the business in 2015 proper. We started going to market in 2016. It was just myself and my son, literally around the kitchen table, coming up with the TOMS framework that they explained. We're now 120 people since 2016. And my life before then has all been about sustainability. And sustainability was like bashing your head against a brick wall for so many years. I started out my sustainability business in 1993. I used to work for a company called Arabs. You all know about Arabs. I left Arabs because they did not get sustainability. They didn't see any future in it. So I had to leave. That's how different it is now. Sustainability and social value has gone from zero to hero in just so little time. And we're just benefiting from that as a kind of carrying that wave, if you like. But we've developed this TOMS framework that's endorsed by local government and used by central government, and is probably the most widely used solution around. So social value, been explained brilliantly, is about social, economic and environmental impact. It's a triple bottom line framework. It's not just about people, it's not just about apprenticeships, not just about jobs, it's about protecting our environment, about climate change. It's about all those issues around community as well. So it's about that triple bottom line. It's about social values delivered by the organization itself, plus your supply chain. And your supply chain, depending on how you are, might be 50, 60, even 85% of the social value you can unlock. So great that you measure what you're doing. Do not forget your supply chain, and you should be thinking about how to embed social value there. So it's about the triple bottom line, it's about within the organization, and also about your supply chain. The framework we've developed, called the National TOMS Social Value Framework, endorsed by central government and by local government, and also mapped against the global goals for sustainable development, based around 5 themes and 20 outcomes, 48 measures. That's the core set. 5 themes are quite simple: work, jobs and skills, really, the economy, supporting our communities, protecting our planet, and social innovation. And there's a series of outcomes and measures that allow you to put a value to each of your impacts. So in terms of outcomes, for instance, one of the outcome might be more jobs for disadvantaged people, and disadvantaged people might include ex-offenders or young people trying to not offend again, or it might be disabled people, or it might be young people coming out of care. So if you as an FM industry can give people those sorts of jobs, then it means that care leaver doesn't go straight on to benefits. They actually get a job and they contribute to society positively. And so that's kind of what we're looking at with the framework. So it's an action-based framework and is kind of a theory of change. And so we spent 18 months developing it. It's continuous sort of development. And really we're asking the questions, what do you have to do to make a change? To understand the change that's needed, we asked a whole lot of local authorities. We spent 18 months understanding what they need to come back with the activities. So it's quite a simple series of activities, really a menu to get involved in. This is some of the stuff, you know, for instance, sustainable procurement, looking at plastic reduction. So we measure or put a value on a kilo of plastic recycled, that's primary plastics. You might put apprenticeships there, you've got employing locally, volunteering. The framework allows you to put a pound value on that. So when earlier I mentioned the 17 billion pounds worth of social value that the industry has the ability to unlock, it's using the TOMS framework to unlock that level of impact. And that's where I think we need to focus. So you all know about sort of screening of your suppliers, and of course things like sort of anti-slavery and how you manage children in your supply chain, probably quite big issues for you, I am sure. And this is where we have the ESG sort of screening element, and that's kind of core to what the industry's been involved in, because it's ultimately about compliance, ensuring you're not breaking the law. We're on the other side of the scale, if you like, the other side of the coin. If one side of the coin is approving, accrediting your suppliers, our side is value creation. So how do you work with your suppliers? How do you work with your business to add value? How can you work with your customers who are in your building to add value? So it's an added value. So it's that sort of element. So you go from screening to check their meeting conditions, and then you're moving into adding value. And that's kind of where we focus. So just beginning to land it now in the world of workplace management and facilities management, I should say. So if you look at the real estate cycle, quite simple, really. You know, community consultation, you've got planning, you've got construction, property management, occupation, and then with any luck, so that's the kind of full life cycle. And as a business, the framework's been designed to run like a golden thread through all of that, and we think you can. We know you can unlock social value at every single stage. Community consultation, understanding need, planning, absolutely look at how you embed in planning, construction, of course. And then we get into property management and occupation. This is where you guys, or the industry, FM industry, focuses on. Now, what's interesting about this bit is that I thought when I started doing this type of analysis, I didn't think it was going to be that important. Your bit is by far and away the most important bit of the social value story. That's why it's so frustrating. You guys are not really tackling it properly and embedding it into how you do it. And I'll show you why. So let's look at a 10-year life cycle, 2 years construction and then build. And so we've got the construction of the total social values delivered is probably about 10%. And yet all we hear at social value conferences is how wonderful Skanska are. Sorry, Skanska. No, but, you know, it's the construction, it's the infrastructure, right? And that's, I understand there's a big impact there. And it's immediate, and they're brilliant at telling you, Wilmot Dixon, they're all out there showing off how much they're doing with apprenticeships, and young offenders and blah. And it lasts 2 years, and then I get on with your life because I've built my thing now, not HS2, I might say, that goes on for years and years and years. But I've built my thing now, and then you move off. Then it's about the building, you see, this is where you guys come in. So there's two parts to this. How you manage the building, 10% or 15% of the total social value. And then it's what your occupiers do. If we think about a built asset, it's sitting on the ground. It's not a spaceship. It has its tentacles into our community. It's there for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years. What we want to do, what you need to do, is think about how you unlock the value of how that property is managed and how the occupier is engaging with the community, because that's 80% of the puzzle. So you are the jam that unlocks that. Your industry is the jam that unlocks that. You guys need to grasp this and say, look, of course we've got to get the heating sorted out. There's nothing more useless than a building that's cold. Of course we get the IT sorted out and working. Hygiene, chaps, that is hygiene. It's not about that anymore. It is about that, but it's about doing that extra mile. How are you working with the occupier if you're managing the building, either internal property team or external management team, to get them engaged with the community? How are you, for instance, using your in-house employment of local people? Are you setting your team's targets? Do you work with HR in that? If you're going through outsourcing your FM team, are you embedding social value into your procurement processes? Are you embedding 15% on everything you buy? And if you are the occupier, what are you doing about supporting local community projects? These are all things that you guys should be doing. I think the FM team has an opportunity to do this. So moving into this whole world of well, which I think is really important, extend well into CSR and culture and working with the organisation. So to make life slightly easier, we've developed with IWFM, a set of FM TOMs, they're called Facilities Management TOMs. We're just updating it over the next few months. It's specifically designed for the industry and brings in elements that are not into the main set of TOMs. And anyone who wants a set of the FM TOMs, please reach out. I think IWFM have them anyway, but reach out to us if you need them. And so that's there to design. And just a few examples. This is the first building I brought up is I'm showing you the construction. Typical, isn't it? This is me falling into my own trap. How wonderful construction is. This is Prologis doing a whole load of great construction. But we've been working with Prologis for a whole number of years now, and they're doing the most amazing stuff and looking at unlocking all sorts of value across their supply chain. The building I wanted to show you was 245 Hammersmith Road, and here we are now involved in the ongoing use of the building. And so we've been exploring things like social leases. So that's, you've heard of green leases, I'm sure. We're now exploring social lease, and a social lease requires the occupier to have a social value action plan and to deliver social value over the period of the lease. Now, that's a really interesting option, I think, because then it gives a reason for the FM team to engage with the occupier, because the lease binds them to engage with the community and deliver social value. So to support this, we've also developed something called Real Estate Social Value Index, RESV for short, that's specifically designed to help organisations measure the social value during the occupation. And it's broken down into 3 elements, which is, are you fit to deliver? Do you have the governance in place to live? And then we put a value on that. And so we've just finished some work with Westfield. We've done about 120 assets so far. 1 minute, thank you. And this is Westfield. We've been looking at both office buildings, residential, and also retail buildings, looking at the social value through the occupier phase. And this is kind of really interesting. It's easy to get to the supply chain because they've got contractually bound, much harder to get to the occupiers in this, but you can do, and a lot of them are really interested when you engage. So look, I'm going to wrap up now. So I think just where I finish off where I started out, which is, that 17 billion, that's the opportunity, I think. And I should say that if any of your organisations wants to win work with the GPA in FM, and there's 13 billion pounds worth of work there, then they have a obligation to include 10% in their weightings on procurement. And we're working with them now, and they're talking about putting that up to 15 or 20%. That basically means if you don't have a social value strategy, you will not win work with government. It's not going to happen because they will go with organisations that do. So it's becoming really, really important. So there's a massive opportunity here to engage with owners to unlock that broader societal impact. You guys, facilities management, are at the forefront of that. I think you need to shift your sort of vision, if you like, away from purely managing the building and how well it runs, to actually doing that whilst thinking about the community where you are. And then I think we've got a real opportunity to unlock additional value for our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guy. I think that really helps to demonstrate how social value is key to facilities management and workplace. That's really interesting. Thank you. So now to tell us more about Skanska's social value strategy, hand over to Sharon.
I'm going to defend our position as Skanska. Yeah, I'm Sharon Maynard. So I've worked in this position as Head of Environment for Building Services for the past 2 years. I've worked for Skanska now for coming up to 13 years. And the reason I sort of say that is because I'm going to talk a bit about our evolution from a social value perspective. And so I will be highlighting our journey in FM under its various guises, some examples of that evolution, some lessons that we've learned, and look forward to some Q&A with you over a drink shortly. So this is a very old picture. That child probably works for Skanska right now, but I make no apologies for that, because what I want to talk about is the fact that social value per se, certainly in Skanska, is not a new thing. We have been, as long as I've worked on contracts and projects, there have been people who've been wanting from our members of our teams to be working positively with the communities that we are, spending a lot of our time in. And that's something that I think is, whilst we're going to talk a lot about measurement, it's something that we shouldn't lose sight of, and that willingness and how that's going to evolve and how we're going to help people evolve to give more meaningful impacts and add to social value going forward is important. But for the 13 years that I've worked in Skanska, we've been doing these sorts of activities. In 2015, which is when this photo was taken, we launched our Lend a Hand Day scheme, which is when every member of Skanska staff were given an extra day of leave to use for volunteering work or any type of social activities that they wanted to. And then we would try and report and collect on that information. But what we were finding was that as social value sort of rose up the agenda of our client organisations and our customers, we were really struggling to demonstrate exactly what it was we were doing. And I know we were doing a lot, because at one point in time, I was the gatekeeper of those T-shirts and I had to order them continuously, it felt like, and it was trying to try and manage where they were. So I know that things were happening. We were just really struggling to try and move things from project-based to having a system which we were calling community investment at the time, to the social value kind of agenda and remit that we're looking at now. So another thing that was part of this struggle was that we were trying to move things from being a niche activity that were carried out by people like Fran and Laura and my team to the wider business. And so this is not rocket science. This seems like a really basic thing now, but this is where we've got to in terms of our evolution of the social value agenda. So rather than having to explain that we've got buy-in from the top, which we have from a social value perspective, we've now got a policy which we can hold up and show signed off by senior members of our business, which is again not groundbreaking. We had to focus our activities, and I'm going to come back to our priorities shortly, and then that would allow us to measure and to carry out sort of required guidance, training, and communicate to the business. So this is where we are in terms of our social value agenda rollout at the moment. But as I say, it's just an iteration. It's just the evolution of activities that have been happening for a long time. But we just want to have a clear way of communicating that externally and measuring it better. So in terms of our priorities, why are they important? So we've heard from the Tom's perspective that there is now criteria, which is great. There are quite a lot of criteria, and for our guys and girls working on the contracts with lots of other things to look at, it's our job in the central team to try and focus and hone what it is we're trying to do, to allow them to understand it, and again move things from being understood by a small group of people to being understood by the whole business. We also wanted to be able to report better on things that we're already doing, perhaps speaking to the point about wanting to be able to publicise the benefit that we're adding. And therefore we needed to focus our efforts rather than creating new work streams. We've got initiatives in these sort of 4 areas at the moment. So quite a well-established net zero target. Inclusion and diversity is a big program that's being rolled out from top to bottom in our business at the moment. And then skills and employment and supply chain, so basically our people and the people doing the work for us, are a priority continuously. So this is where we were focusing our efforts. And hopefully by focusing, rather than narrowing down what it is we're going to report on and narrowing the impact we have, we think that the focus actually magnifies the impact. And it's again to help the wider business understand where we are. One of the challenges that we're facing is that when we're talking to our customers and clients, everybody has the same end goal where they want to be. But we find ourselves in bids and tenders where we've got the entire framework of measurement put in, and the bottom right-hand corner where the total number is what we're going to be compared on. And that's a challenge that we have to then find better ways of engaging with our clients for the event to try and hone their activities. The most success we've had in contracts and projects is where from the beginning there is a clear framework and an agreement about what it is we're going to be looking at. Is where we're working particularly struggling with the homelessness. We've worked in areas where it's been about addiction. We've worked in areas where the client has been specifically engaged with the schools. And so everybody knowing on the contract from the beginning that that is what we are targeting has made the outcomes, magnified the outcomes and just made them that much more significant, we feel. So that's a challenge that we've got to try and demonstrate why having less might actually deliver more. And that's something that we're working through with the clients. So then we're into rollout and measurement. So this is our approach across the Skanska business, but specifically in FM, our template has been developed and adopted by the rest of our business from FM, from Fran, in fact. So it has started in FM in terms of our key activities and how we're going to lay out our template. And this is just to allow projects to have the correct training, introduction, methodology in terms of measurement, and be able to report up centrally into our business. The rollout of this is across several parts of our business. So it's obviously through our environment team, but the HR team, the procurement team are all part of the steering groups, but they're also clicked in terms of when this template lands. It's not an activity that gets handed to the environment team. It's something that is now much more widely recognised as kind of a group and team effort. We've also got a junior leadership team, and they're tasked with projects, and they are looking at this as a separate activity, mainly to do with what we offer in terms of every contract that we are bidding for. What is our minimum social value offering, regardless of what the client is asking for, and that's something that we're developing at the moment as well. And the final part of the rollout is that because we've been doing lots of things, wearing brightly coloured t-shirts, charging around the country, helping people, and not being very good at measuring that, we're doing a retrospective exercise against those 4 areas, looking back for the past 12 months and collecting the information so that we have a baseline to sort of work from and understand where we are in terms of measurement. But it is continuous evolution. Go back on. So this is what happened quite a lot of the time, people digging stuff up and making things look better. And what we're trying to move towards is more specific and targeted interventions. So on the far end of the screen there, we've got work going on in one of our hospitals during Earth Hour, where as a facilities manager, we're trying to look at where we've got areas of impact from an energy conservation perspective and using our skills and platforms that we've got available to us to support the occupier from that perspective. People are getting a bit braver in their activities, so engaging with local artists to try and make sure that you know, it was a hoarding on that particular project. But generally speaking, those sorts of activities aren't new, but people are much more engaged in terms of what is the challenge in that local area. Graffiti is one. There are well-known artists. How can we engage with them and make sure that we utilise them where we can? And then things like careers fairs, which we've talked about, some of the other speakers have mentioned already, where before we would be looking to go to universities and speak to people who are early in their careers, perhaps, in terms of engaging with them to come and work out with them. But now that programme is much wider. So in terms of military ex-offenders, but also people that have just not been in work for several years. Perhaps they've been, you know, growing their family, or there's lots more awareness now of the different types of people that we want to engage and bring into our industry. And that sort of awareness of people wanting to do the right thing is sort of translating into the activities that they're delivering on a day-to-day basis. So what lessons have we learned? social value or community investment or neighbourly relations, I think it was called really early on in my career, is happening lots. And part of our challenge is that sometimes people don't know that that's what it is. And so we need to help guide them in terms of direction, but also in measuring what's happening. So training, monitoring, reporting is a big sort of chunk of our work at the moment. Formalising the process is taking it from a niche activity to the masses, which is really important. Once we get the commercial people involved, things really do change, and that's something that they like. They like things that they can measure and put a value against, and that's a great way of engaging with them. And one of the key things I've learned this year is that whilst this evolution has been happening, we haven't engaged an awful lot with external providers to help us, and that's something that we've done sort of more significantly this year, just to look at our approach. Is it still relevant? Are we targeting things that we should be? Is there any, could we be pressing a bit harder in certain areas? Because construction, contracting, the FM market, it's not, they're not industries known for, you know, turning their direction really quickly. So these things that we've been doing for a long time, you know, we sometimes need a fresh pair of eyes to challenge us and to say, you might think you're doing the right thing, but perhaps you should look over here and poke in that corner a bit. And so what I just wanted to leave you with was to go right back to the beginning. So we've talked a lot about measurement. It's really important for all of the things that I've said, but we shouldn't forget the drive and the want of our teams that work on these long-term contracts to actually contribute to the communities that they work in. So Josie, Flawless Touch, owns a small business down the road from one of our contracts. The guys know her well. Her shop was vandalised. They started the cleanup before she arrived because they knew she would be upset by it. Callum went to one of our sites to have a look round. It's not really Callum I'm interested in, it's our team and how much enjoyment he's getting in showing Callum round. He's got no benefit from that on a day-to-day basis, apart from the love of wanting to engage with somebody and bring them on and maybe spark a bit of interest in our industry. And then the bottom picture there is just cots put together by our teams, you know, in a spare moment in a unit in one of our hospitals. And you know, when we talk about measuring things, knowing that clinicians are not having to put together cots and they're spending their time doing the things that they should be doing, how do we measure that? I'm pretty sure that when the guys set out to do that activity, they weren't thinking about what line item they were going to fill in and what the value would be. So I'm really enthusiastic and looking forward to what the next evolution I'm going to see in my career within Scoutska on a social value perspective. Maybe it'll be called something new sometime soon, I don't know. But I know that we can put in place the framework and the measurement. It's very difficult to put in place the culture and the want and the need for people to feel like they're putting something back into the community. And I feel that we've got that in our business, so we're well on our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It's really interesting to hear how the council is continuing to improve on its social value programme and all that we've achieved so far. That's really good. Thank you. Right, now to tell us about social value at Maze, I'll hand you over to James.
So I guess just to set the scene, so my role at Mace is Global Head of Responsible Business. And what that actually means is everything under sustainability and social value. And those of you who know Mace, you might know us as a general contractor. Equally, we're a global consultancy on project program managers, cost consultancy. And then we've also got FM Business Mace operators for about 20 million square foot of assets under management. So we've probably been on a similar journey on social value that a lot of people here have talked about and experiencing. So back in 2016, we wanted to understand what is the value of all the activities we're doing, whether it's community engagement, educational outreach, volunteering events. We were doing a lot of kind of disparate activities. There were lots of good stories, but we weren't able to bring it together and say, what is the real value being created here? And again, question is this a space we should be directing our efforts if we want to really create social value? So as a business, Mace has got a vision around redefining the boundaries of ambition. We talk about the impact we have as a business, and it's easy to talk about financial impact and increasingly climate change and carbon impact. But actually, when we start to look at the measurement metrics and how do you report on financial value, as Guy was talking around to social value, the numbers coming out around social value contribution are significant. And that's kind of where we focused on. So in 2017, we set ourselves not just a target around how profitable is the business and how much do we reduce our carbon emissions, but we said we want to create a certain amount of value societies. So we set it around £500 million of value society every year that we create directly from our operations as a business. And so we've sort of been on a journey along the way of what are the right things to measure, how do we measure it? And Guy gave a really good graphic around what's 1 hour of volunteering equate to from social value. What's the value of creating an apprenticeship or a job opportunity for someone, or helping an ex-offender so they don't re-offend and therefore cost something to society. And what we've been really using it for, and we use a slightly different framework to social value portal and Tom's, but when they use a framework, what it's been really good for is answering the questions of what is the financial equivalent of the social value we are doing as a business. It's great to put a number on it, great to say what you're creating and set improvement targets and where do you go in the future. But equally to understand where is the area your business can create social value. So in 2016, 2017, we did a lot as a construction business. And actually in the last few years, we've been sort of moving that towards what do we do as an FM provider and what we do as a global consultant. And that's where we're starting to see the scale of this kind of social value grow significantly. So that's our target at the moment. By 2026, we said we want to be creating £700 million per year as social value to our business, our clients, local communities and wider society and governments. And that's just from our direct operations. So it doesn't include what we do with the supply chain, doesn't include what we do as a contractor. So Guy's graphic is showing what happens in the construction phase, then through the FM operational phase is really useful. We're currently as a contractor building a building at Leadenhall. Over a 3 to 4 year program, we're looking at about £130 million of social value being created. That's just in those first 3-4 year window of the building. So you can imagine the scale of social value you can create whoever comes in to manage that property over the next 20, 30, 40 years. So suddenly the scale gets significantly bigger. And what we're realizing again is that number is quite low and we need to up it to billions given the scale and the impact and the influence of our business. So the framework we use, it's called Value Society. We work with a company called Brit2, but it's the exact same concept of what Guy talked about. An activity you do will have a social value impact to society at a certain measurement, and that helps to understand what is the value creating and where do we direct our efforts and resources going forward. So what we look at is across 5 different capitals, and the 6th one called manufactured. So you've got social, natural, intellectual, and we track all the activities we do as a business across these areas. And what's been really interesting is understanding, firstly, where can we as a business, whether it's with our FM hat on or contractor hat on or project program manager hat on, is where can we really move the dial and pull the levers to create real change in these spaces? And the answer is different depending on which way we look at it. So in our construction business, it's easy for us to kind of donate labour, donate diggers and materials and excess equipment from a construction site and work with local communities or commit to a certain number of hours of volunteering during that 3-4 year construction period. But with your FM business, it's really difficult. Someone front of house can't just take a day off if they're paid by the hour because they're going to lose income for that day, and so they can't easily volunteer their time. We don't have materials like you do as a contractor that you put to local communities. So we have to take a different look at how do we, as an FM provider, create what we call value society. And that's sort of the journey we've been on. Where do we prioritize our efforts to make sure we can create the greatest value society for our business from our direct operations with our supply chain and supply partners and our clients in the areas that we're kind of talking about. And this is our impact last year, so 2022. So we created £760 million of value society through our direct activities as a business. And what we look at are on those indicators that you saw on the slide is the combination of positive and negative indicators. So it is a net position. So everything we do around creating apprenticeships, job opportunities, community engagement, educational outreach, all of those are positives. They help us improve our position. But we also include the negatives. So some of these around manufactured, natural and social, they're quite small because actually a lot of them are negative. When we create carbon emissions as a business, because we're not a true net zero carbon business, we are causing a negative impact on society. And as Guy showed before, there's a social value with a ton of carbon. When we have late payments, when we have people on 0-hour contracts or short-term labour, all of that is negative. when people go on sick leave or you have accidents. So we include all those negatives as well. And again, our journey is even get to the point where what's our performance and the social value impact of our ED&I or our gender pay gap. And some of those can be, you'll never get better than a zero position. You're fighting against the negative. But what it helps understand is we can do more to increase the positives in the value add, and we can do more to reduce the negative impact we have. And it gives that kind of balanced position. And I guess just a bit of insight around where we at Mace have the greatest impact is, yes, there's a lot around the salaries we pay, the tax we pay as a business, but actually it's around the training development we provide people to help them develop their careers and advance their opportunities. It's around where do we invest in research and development to help advance how you deliver services or do things in a better way. And even vocational qualifications, how do you help upskill people so they can improve their careers. So this is something we run every year, and what we're looking at now is not just how do we apply that to our business space, but how do we do it on a project, or even from the FM space where we're an FM provider, we could say to a client, what we are delivering as an FM provider is creating this much value to society every year. And actually these are the areas we can really do more. You can do more as a client, we can do more with our supply chain partners. And this is really then showing the value of doing a lot of this activity alongside addressing energy, carbon, and all the other aspects. So I'll go through the next 3 slides quite quickly, but it's all about looking at reporting and understanding the value we create around the positives and negatives to give that net position on what we're looking at. So it's the ability to say to a client, this is the value we are creating, or social value we're creating by everything we do and where we're going to focus on. Equally, then it's about the social value, everything's created equal. So a lot of that stuff is about creating social value for Mace. Some of it is for local communities, some of it is wider communities, and some of it will be for governments. So again, it might not just be about creating that total number, but you might want to prioritize creating social value for individuals or society rather than a company and a business. So again, it helps us understand where is the value being created and what do we need to focus on. And then finally, again, when you're starting to talk about global portfolios and global supply chains, understanding where in the world is this value being created. And again, is it equal? Can we prioritize or make efforts in different areas and just get that geographical perspective? So I guess just to wrap up, we did a lot in the past around, we would do community outreach. We'd have people go to a school and talk about engineering or construction. We do volunteering days, and all of that is really good and there's great stories. But over the last few years, we kind of learned, especially with our FM hat on, where can we really make a change? And these are kind of 3 areas that we can really make a difference. And they might not always be as exciting as kind of the outreach, the community engagement, the fundraising, but actually that's where we see a lot of potential to create social value, especially with what we control as an FM provider. So when we talk about supply diversity, one of the things we looked at a few years ago was we've got to provide food and beverage, we've got to provide services, we've got to provide products as an FM provider. So can we steer that spend towards social enterprise? Clients and the up guys get the same product and service, however, we're spending the same amount of money, but the social enterprise we're supporting is doing good elsewhere through the business. So can we direct spend towards those whose business is doing better, a B Corp, or with someone that's a women-owned business, or what we're finding from clients in Canada or Peru is actually then it's about Indigenous workforce. So all these different metrics, we can control that. We can control or influence or steer towards where the spend goes, and what we say is what are the right metrics to track and what do we want to prioritize. And it will vary depending on different countries and what they want, but that kind of shows what we control, because we control the supply chains we use and the people we work with and what we ask from them and where we spend the money. The other bit then around workforce development. So let's talk about, we can create apprenticeships and we need to create more apprenticeships and access to T-levels, but actually from the UK government at the moment, it's also about returnships. So how do you get over 50s back into work? And I know the government's got vested interest in that, but there's equal ways to look at bringing young people and older people back in the workforce and social value being associated with that. There's training, vocational qualifications, but sometimes just sharing knowledge can help create social value, maybe more for business than society, but all of that helps. And then the third one, ethical sourcing. So I'm not just talking about buying FSC certified timber or recycled paper or things like that, but it's around how do you manage modern slavery in your supply chain. It doesn't matter where you're in the world, there are risks of slavery in the UK as well as there will be in China and other parts of the world. how do you understand the human rights risks in your supply chain, and making sure that that product you're buying from a far-flung part of the world isn't at risk of having human rights violations in it. And we actually saw a lot of that when working with solar panels for clients that wanted to add solar to their portfolios, finding that actually when you dig into it, there's a lot of solar panel products sourced from parts of the world that have got real issues with human rights. So again, that's the kind of part that we will work with our clients as the kind of asset manager, helping them decarbonize their portfolios, but adding in that context of what is the risk of human rights, maybe far along the lines of the supply chain that historically we might not have considered because they're not the ones we're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. And then even things like employment contracts we offer people, not or reducing the use of zero-hour contracts, reducing short-term labour, paying London living wage or the equivalent living wage in different parts of the world. All of that is things we can control as an asset provider that will help create social value. And so what the framework's doing, and what Guy talked about as well, is it gives you that insight. You can understand what is the social value we are creating today as a business. And then with all those various indicators and measures, start to understand as a business and where we work and where we have control, where can we really decide to put more effort in the future to increase the social value. And then you've got a really good metric to report progress, report performance improvement. And it really kind of answers the question, if we're going to make a difference, given what we can do as a business, where are we going to direct that effort? These frameworks are a brilliant way of helping you understand where you want to put your time and people and resources going forward. So it's a bit of a quick run through what Janet Mason would be. Helps answer a few questions around how we're using it and how you might use it as well as.
Thank you very much, James. Really help to show how social value is important in some of the less immediately visible ways, as well as those which we've already discussed. Thank you. So hopefully we've now got a few minutes for some questions and answers. If you've got a question which you'd like to address to a particular speaker, then please do say, although I'm sure the other speakers will also chip in with any viewpoints they've got. Also, I don't know if we have got questions and answers available online now. So Lucy will let us know if there's any questions from our online webinar viewers. Has anybody got any questions? Yes, Brian.
Thanks, Andy. Question for Guy. Just want to be clear. You mentioned TOMS quite a few times. In my mind, that means target operating model. So am I right or wrong?
It stands for themes, outcomes, and measures.
Thank you.
Themes out rather than target. I mean, you could almost frame it as a target operating model, sort of, in as much as it is a interconnected sort of framework to push this bit here and out pops a result over there. But it stands for themes, outcomes, and measures.
Yes.
Chris Wood, before asking my question, I ought to explain why I'm here, because actually I'm nearer 80 than 70. I'm retired. I'm what's termed now as an old FART. But why I am here is because I'm a big believer in global FM. I was on the what was then the BIFM board at the time that it was born. And I come from a background working for a big blue chip company at an international level. So I've got a bit of useful background. My question is though, because I retired from that company 20 years ago and then did some consulting work, as many of us do, for 10 years. But I'm about 15 years or 10 years or so out of date, and I readily accept that. But in the 1990s, the corporate speak was corporate social responsibility, CSR, and it was a balance sheeted item, and it was a company report item. And actually, there's nothing I've heard today which wasn't represented in my then employer's program for its CSR activity. Doesn't matter whether it's putting the value on investment in the local community, environmental contributions, any of the aspects and the headers that were here today. Wonderful, but it's reinterpretation. And I just like to, my question is, what's the difference?
But I think we should ask Gaz. Give it a you guys come up here. Oh, the person. Give it a go. And so I'm not too far behind you, and I was conscious that when I was talking about 1993, that, you know, and I left Arabs, that kind of aged me, right, to some extent.
You should have worked for my company because
What was your company
you'd have been
called?
in the mainstream. It doesn't matter what my.
So it wasn't Arab. Perhaps your company was advanced, but I know back then the sustainability was a absolute ball ache. I fought tooth and nail, and there was no way it was going to be considered by the board.
Well, ours was led by the chairman.
But perhaps you were enlightened. Back then, the vast majority of the organisation was not enlightened. They might allow a little bit of CSR money over here, but it was like 0.01%. And no way would it really be allowed to change our bottom line, because the bottom line is what the shareholders cared about. And that's right. And yes, we'll make ourselves feel slightly less guilty by having this community stuff. Social value changes the picture totally. Now, I understand your skepticism, that's fair enough, but actually it shifts it into, because what we're now talking about is a multi-million-pound contribution. So we're looking at Skanska as a business saying, how do we ensure that our business as a whole is not only is delivering value from our very core, not just a bit of CSR budget, that's neither here nor there, 0.1%. It's actually at the core of the business, not about what we do, but how we do it. And that's the difference you see Skanska faithfully doing, and actually what the Act is trying to do, the Social Value Act is trying to embed it, encourage businesses to take that opportunity to embed it in. So, but why don't Skanska have a go at that one?
I think that with a lot of these things, I mean, if we look at carbon at the moment, we're looking at carbon in a big way in Skanska. It's the third time I've looked at carbon since I've been in Skanska, but it's whose agenda it's on. So as I sort of said when I was talking, I think that activities have been happening, but it's the kind of mainstreaming it, it's the normalizing it, it's the you can't get away from it, it has to be done. There is a number, your number will be compared with someone else's number. The number should be bigger than the number you put in now. I think it's just magnified, or as I said, sort of evolved. So yes, I think that the ethos of it, as with carbon, has been an environment for so long, is the same, but it's just now there's no getting away from it, and there is a number. And once there's a number, I just feel like it's a different.
We actually had to put numbers on everything.
But
and it doesn't matter whether you are managing a refinery or you are managing a portfolio of properties, whether on any of the aspects, you actually had to put an annual return in, and it was consolidated into the company's accounts.
But now we're finding our number.
It was wonderful.
Is going to be compared to
It
Mason's
was
number.
meaningful. It really was. It was a pain in the arse. If you
But that was the old world of CSR. We were destroying the planet over here, and actually we're doing a bit of helping the community over here, and that appeared on the balance sheet. We could pretend to our shoulders we're doing a little bit over here, but here we're destroying the planet. That was the old world, and I know it because I was in it. Okay, the new world is very, very different. We are no longer allowed to get away with this sort of just this guilt sort of gift.
Well, we weren't.
No, I mean, but then we were, and still see businesses do. But
it's about purpose as well, isn't it? First 10 years of my career, you're like so banging your head against the wall to justify the existence of sustainability, and then a few things accelerated and changed pre and during COVID, and now it's a case of we get on and do it and deliver it. And I think social value is coming along that journey quite well as well. Around, okay, it's time to explain what it is, how can you contribute to it, but it's getting to the point of just come and deliver it. And people are kind of, whether it's society or investors, whatever the driver is, it's people want a job with purpose, they want a role with purpose. And if you can define how someone, whether you're a procurement manager and a front of house FM manager, you don't have to have the title as social value manager or environmental sustainability manager, but your role creates purpose and has purpose. And these frameworks are kind of putting something around what maybe was hard to explain and group together, and shows this is how this business creates purpose. It's not that we create £2 million or £2 billion of revenue or whatever £100 million of profit. It's that we have a net zero carbon plan, and we're a carbon neutral business that's creating £1 billion of social value every year. I think there's more of a shift away from the pounds and dollars and more towards what's the real purpose of your business and what's the impact you're having? And social value is a really nice way to show non-financial purpose and impact of the business. And these frameworks are a really good way of starting to kind of effectively communicate that. And then also work out how do you improve and how do you better that to make sure moving forward we do progress.
Just to add to that, which I don't want to go on from that, is that what we're now seeing, particularly for the next generation, but what people are looking for when they're looking for their next job isn't just around that bottom line salary band. It's looking around their organisation that they want to go to and what is their social value worth. Why are they going? What are they doing in that arena from that perspective? And a CSR policy won't get that in there now. What are they doing to drive outcomes? This is about it. CSR was great stuff. You know, we do this, but social value is taking it to that next level. It's driving the outcomes around why you're doing that activity. What is the benefit from doing that from that perspective?
I like that.
Yeah, from that perspective.
And I really like this question because my generation, when I started studying and I said to my dad, I wanted to study sustainability, my dad is like, you're never gonna get a job. Actually, like, and actually becomes a job now. So for me, it's like, apart from a job with a purpose, it's also like, I've seen a change, a switch from just a corporation that, you know, uses resources and exploits people, actually started to give like meaningful logo, I don't know, importance to where they're operating. And it's very local. So we got global, as was CSR. Now we're going back to local. So we can really make a difference locally rather than globally, because it's easier to measure and it's easier to see the results. So for me, it's, you know, like, I really like this challenge question. Thank you for asking.
Ilara's written an article on CSR versus social value. So if you've got a smartphone,
I'll send it to you.
So
I'll just let you bring it back to earth.
We've got time for one more, not online.
More questions?
Yeah.
I'd like to make an observation and just to defend our friend over here.
Not CDs.
I-
The oldest in the room.
Back in the early 2000s, I did a lot of research on CSR. I probably read between 300 and 400 corporate CSR reports. And thankfully, at least my wife was thankful, most of those went in the rubbish bin, recycling, by the way, on the basis that they were, if you'll excuse the expression, BS. And I fear, and it is a fear, that social value will go the same route. I saw a report the other day which said back in 20 years ago, they introduced the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. Its adoption has gone like a typical hockey stick, but alongside it has gone the impact on the environment. So they almost have grown in parallel. So as the reporting actually changed anything, the one thing I would observe, just listening to you, and a fascinating report. So I want to defend our friends from Skanska just for a moment. I've worked alongside a number of people from Skanska. In your introduction, you mentioned your values, better together. Somebody, I think the lady over there, I beg your pardon, I didn't catch your name, mentioned soft skills. We know how to do that. Well, again, I'll criticise the industry beyond FM and into construction. I don't think you do understand the soft skills, because I think the fundamental part of that, and I think kindly you mentioned it, sitting down with your customers, your social environment, understanding what is important to them, not necessarily what's important to you. And similarly with your suppliers, if those values are meaningful, then that should be part of your procurement selection process, because you won't deliver social value except to make the bid analysis happy and the analyzers. And I think the danger is, we really want to change the way, it is the soft skills, it is the culture behind it that will change it, not the reporting process that you use. Because the smart companies who aren't as switched on as you will manipulate those numbers any day of the week, because they've got lots of accountants and statisticians who can produce a lot more BS than you can, and our government can.
We got some cynics. in the room.
No, I don't think
Is that a question?
salute that. I'm not a cynic, I'm a realist. Because when it comes down to winning, part of that 17 billion that you mentioned, certain companies will do it because it's the right thing to do. Other companies will do it because it's the advantageous thing to do. And unless you change the culture, you won't change. So all credit to our friends from Skanska, because I've worked alongside them for a long time and I've seen that culture at work. So good for you. That's just my point.
Is there a question?
Well, hopefully our speakers will be able to join us for a drink and some nibbles afterwards. So if anybody's got any other questions, then please have a word with them direct after the event. Just remains for me to thank everybody again for coming, and thank you to those who've joined us online this evening. Got the IWFM CPD numbers for this event for those of you who need them. So for the webinars, 9515369. For those who are with us this evening, Skanska at 7593930. So I'd just like to take the opportunity again to thank Katie Dowding for making this fantastic facility available to us to host us this evening. To all of the team from Skanska, particularly to Emma for sorting out all of the IT struggles and for providing such a fantastic experience as our host this evening. It's been really good. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers for everything you said tonight, for preparing your presentation. It's been really interesting. And thank you all again for coming. If anybody, as I said earlier, if anybody is interested in joining the International SIG, either as a member or hopefully joining the committee and playing a more active role in the SIG, then please do have a word with myself or with Lucy or Joanna or Paul over there as well. And also thank you again to Lucy for organising this evening's events. I think this wouldn't have happened without all her hard work. Thank you, Lucy.